Hey guys, hello, welcome back to my channel. It's me, Steven. You got Claire up there, being real picturesque. Eleanor right there. I love them. And Buddy is off screen looking at me like, oh geez, he's gonna be filming again. He'll be talking forever. Hi, so welcome back to my channel. If you've not been here before, double welcome. I do appreciate you clicking on the video. The subject matter of this video is probably the reason you're saying hi to me for the first time. Howdy. My regular subscribers, this is probably not a video for you specifically. And I do want to say you're probably going to hear some things that might not be in line with who I am today. So I don't want this to color your impression of me. But it's, and I do want to be as transparent as I can, as I always try to be. The only things I'm not going to do are talk about things that may have happened that might have been a little illegal, because I don't want to get myself in trouble. I'm going to try not to swear, because I try not to swear on my channel, although I fail at that in real life. I love to swear. That F word is my favorite. And and for the people who are just joining me for the first time, maybe looking for some experience, the stories I'm going to share with you are not to shock, to embarrass myself, to humiliate myself, not to be funny. They're not meant for anything other than to illustrate the insidious nature of alcoholism. This video is, when I wanted to film this video a couple of years ago, I was kind of twisting on how was I going to present the topic. And then on my anniversary, I thought, why don't I just film a share? Not a, that's my share impersonation. Not a share, but, so I don't know where that came from. But if I were in a meeting, say, and I was asked to share and talk about my story to celebrate my anniversary, and that's what we do sometimes in recovery meetings. To celebrate, we get to share our story of really the worst thing that's ever happened to us to help us celebrate the best day ever. So this video is going to be more like a typical story or share that I would give you in a West Coast meeting. I do go to meetings of a particular program, which I'm not going to support or bash. I'm not going to promote it or dismiss it. It saved my life, so whatever. On the West Coast, we talk a lot. Honestly, if you have a share, it's usually like 45 minutes, an hour. On the East Coast, where I got sober in Boston, where they do things the right way, you have a share, it's maybe 10 minutes. That's got to be it. You have to be able to put your story into that 10 minutes. So you have to decide, what are you going to share? What's the most important part of your story? On the West Coast, you have a little bit more luxury in having some time. So get ready. This is going to be a long video because I do talk a lot, and there's so much to share, so much to talk about. What else should I tell you? This is just my experience. Everyone's experience in sobriety and in their addictions are vastly different. When I got sober, I met people who binge drank occasionally, and ended up being an alcoholic. I have a friend who drank on Tuesdays. That's the day that her husband was away, and she had the whole day on Tuesday for herself. She drank on Tuesday, once a week she drank, and she still ended up becoming an alcoholic. I drank every single day for decades, 25 years. Drugs or alcohol were in my system for most of my life. So everyone's story is different. This is just mine. All right, I can't think of anything else, but if you have any questions, of course, drop a comment in the section below. Let's go back into the Wayback Machine. And my goal here is to share stories of kind of my childhood, because it was affected crazy by drugs and alcohol, into my middle years, and then into what really happened. And I'm not telling you any of these stories to shock you, to make you laugh, to do anything other than illustrate the insidious nature of alcoholism. For me, in my life, alcoholism was kind of like that music in a horror movie like Jaws. Dun, 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 dun. And bam, it eventually got me. Some people get right away. For me, it was a very long slow progression until it really went through the roof. So in the Wayback Machine, you'd find me. I'm probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old. My mother is kind of a hippie. She embraced the hippie lifestyle. And in that, she basically just liked to get high and drunk every day. She hardly ever worked, had long hair, and really didn't care much about society. Maybe being a hippie was different back then, but that's what she did. Drugs and alcohol were a part of our life every single day. We were super, super duper poor. I think the phrase, is it food insecurity or something like that? We just didn't have a lot. My mother was on food stamps. Everyone seemed to be back then. And food stamps back then, we didn't have a little debit card. We had what looked like Monopoly money. It was printed to look like money, but it was like pink and green and blue. It acted like money. You brought it to the register and the cashier would ring you up and shame you relentlessly every time you gave her one of those things. So food was kind of scarce. We had the government cheese, powdered milk. My mother bought a lot of scrambled eggs and Cheerios. Those were sort of the basics of our diets. So that left her a little bit of money for her Jim Beam or Jack Daniels or Southern Comfort. If it was brown, she drank it. And of course, pot. She tried to grow most of her pot, but she wasn't very successful. That was our most successful house plant, was marijuana growing up. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, if we were rambunctious and we weren't going to go to sleep or we were just misbehaving, my mother would throw us in the back of the car, drive around the neighborhood while she's smoking a joint. And that got her kind of baked, so she didn't care if we were crying. But it also gave my brother and I a bit of a contact high, so we would kind of just go to bed nice and easy, right? And I do remember vaguely misbehaving and acting out, knowing full well that the result would be I'd be thrown into a car and given a little bit of a contact high. So it was the first, I'm like 6 or 7 and already learning how to manipulate the environment around me to change my behavior. Does this sound familiar to you? And that's the theme of my life, honestly. I could probably stop there. I was 8. My brother died in a tragic accident that I witnessed. I was right there. Just awful. And it was life-changing for my mother and me. My mother went off the deep end with her guilt and shame, and not guilt and shame. I don't know what it is. She sent us outside. I think she felt to blame for part of his death. But her remorse and her sadness was so deep that I didn't really exist much. So at that point, I kind of was on my own. She found refuge in drugs and alcohol, and she would take anything and everything that was at her disposal to change her mood and to check out. She just didn't want to be around anymore. But she had me, and I was a responsibility to her. And I think through some of the actions, I think kind of an albatross around her neck, I think it would have been easier for her to just, whatever. But Mark died, and at that point it was just me and my mother. And drugs and alcohol, like I just said, were all the more important in our household. And she couldn't really get as high as she wanted to by herself and still not, like, keep track of me. Can you hear the fireworks in the background? I hate people setting off fireworks. The cats just hate it. But so she would get me high. Now I'm 8. I'm 8 years old, and she would get me high as well. If you know what shotgunning is, she would shotgun me. I couldn't quite smoke pot on my own because my throat was so tender, right? So she would shotgun me, which means she would take a hit, a deep, deep hit, and then she would exhale and I would inhale it from her mouth. So she was like a human water bong in reality. And so the two of us would get high all the time. And this was just every night. I would go to school in the morning, of course, but every night I think just her sadness was so heavy that she just couldn't function, and she couldn't have me running around. So the two of us got high. It was, I have to say, they were some of the most positive memories I have of my mother, because the two of us would sit down, like she would have the munchies like no one's business, and so she would go out and splurge on really and buy something as silly as a Boston cream pie. We sometimes didn't have milk, but she would find a reason to like buy a pie or something, and the two of us would sit down with forks and just eat a Boston cream pie together. And this is one clear memory I have that I hold on to that seemed good of my childhood with my mom. But so at 8, smoking pot with my mom. Flash forward to being 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We were living in Germany, and in Germany, with her second and third husband, pot wasn't so popular. Hash was very popular, and drinking beer, of course, was the life. Germany and beer are synonymous with me. So I'm 10 years old. I'm fairly tall, kind of husky. I was kind of fat. If I was with my mother, I could drink in the bars. It seemed normal. And we didn't go to bars like clubs and stuff in Schönhausen, Germany, near Esslingen in the Baden-Württemberg area. A little guest house. We would go and sit down in this little booth, and there'd be like 5 or 6 GIs, my mother, her husband, 3 or 4, and there's this drinking game called it's a Stiefel, I think. Stiefel. It's a glass boot. So if Cinderella were a cowboy, it was a glass boot, and it was filled with beer, like 2 liters of beer, and you would hold it with the tip up. You would make this gesture on the table, hit the thing a few times with your fingers or something, and then you would drink out of the body of the boot and pass it around, and the boot couldn't hit the table. Not to give you an idea for a drinking game, but if the boot touched the table, you bought the next round. But eventually, air would displace the liquid in the tip of the boot, and it would come splashing down, and you had to buy the next round. Woohoo! That's the game. So it just goes around and around and around. At 10, I needed to get into that game, and I pleaded and pleaded and pleaded till finally my mother was like, all right, fine, sit down. And so I was joyously chugging beer out of this boot that was probably bigger than my torso, and I would get just blotto. Significant memory from that time is just leaving Gasthaus Rosen, I think it was called. I am out of my mind drunk, and we're walking down to the bus, and there are flower pots every 10 feet. I throw up in every single one of them. And we get onto the bus, and we get into the back of the bus, and it's swaying back and forth. And I'm watching vivid memory. These 2 German women, old German women with these like shelf-like breasts that were like up here. They're both looking at me like, because they know what's about to happen. My mother figures out what's about to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. You know that feeling when you know you're going to throw up, but you don't know when? Well, everyone around me knew. She tore the stuff out of the middle section of her purse, and she put it to my face like a feed bag, and I just vomited in her purse. It was, I don't know why I remember it so vividly. And the rest of the night, I was racked with dry heaves. Dry heaves were my curse until I was about 14. I just could not, just awful. I could not control them. That push and that pull, that push and that pull, and nothing really coming out, it was just awful. So by the age of 14, at the end of the school year of my freshman year of high school, I barely survived high school. The only reason I did, I was in story time. I was 14 years old, junior high school. I am in the junior ROTC. I know, awful. It was 1984. The Berlin Wall is still up. And we had a field trip. We had a class trip to West Berlin. I mean, really, it was an opportunity of a lifetime. We drove there in a big coach bus, big, beautiful coach bus. I can almost remember the feel of the seat below me. It was such an exciting trip. We drove there into Berlin. We got the chance to go to Yeah, we saw everything, the wall. But I was going there for like 4 or 5 days. And at that point, I already had a dependence upon alcohol. I was 14 and I probably already qualified for a recovery program. So I wasn't going to go unarmed. I took a bottle of bubble bath that was like the size of my head. And my head was always big. Look at this. And I emptied it out as well as I could. And I filled it up with little bits of whatever I could from my mother's and my stepfather's bar. The apple corn, which is like an apple liqueur that is delicious. Southern Comfort, Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, all of that stuff, all mixed up with the remnants of bubble bath. And it was an unlovely thing. It was redolent of bubble bath and the rest of that stuff all mixed up together. But it was fine. It was something, and it calmed me down. It brought me back down. I hid it outside the windowsill of our hotel room, and my roommate at the time, oh God, he was a German kid. He opened the window up real wide, and he knocked the bottle down. And I remember being jerked forward, like my spine went before I did. My whole body jerked, spasmed, because my alcohol, my only booze, fell multiple stories down to a courtyard below, and I was without anything else. And it was just tragic. And I'll tell you, from that point, I hardly remember anything of the trip. I remember getting lost looking to buy cigarettes, but that's just a story of me at 14 years old, already dependent on alcohol. So at 14, I had managed to develop a number of skills. One of those is to handle the physical effects of alcohol, so I could handle dry heaves and all that stuff. I had developed enough resentment against my mother for not being the parent she should have been, because at this point, I've recognized what good parenting looks like via my friends, or my classmates, I should say. I really didn't have many friends. And I recognized that this was not normal, and my life had never been normal. I can't tell you the number of times the police would show at the Pulitz aisle dressed in green leather with these big giant like automatic weapons. If I felt endangered because there was not just drinking and drugs but physical abuse, that I didn't see that as being part of my alcoholism, being part of being a victim of physical abuse, just relentlessly for years and years. But when things got bad enough, if I felt like I was in danger, at that age, I was finally able to figure out how to stop it from happening. If my mother were being beaten up, or if I was being beaten up by her second and third husbands, both of them, I threatened to call the police, and then my stepfather would kind of hold back and like, all right, Chuck, because I was like Susan Lucci at that point, like I will call the police. So these things all kind of gathered together into the resolve that I had to get out of there. But I was living in Germany at 14. My aunt at that point, I will become an adult at some point in my story, I promise. But my Aunt Elaine was getting married that August, and I wanted to be in the wedding party. She's in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. So she's like, oh, that's a great idea. That would be wonderful. And so that August 3rd, I think, I got on a C5 transport plane with a big pair of headphones, and it cost $10 to fly from Stuttgart to Boston, I think. And I got to Rhode Island, and I told my grandparents that I wasn't going back. I wasn't going back to my mother. My grandmother called my mother, and my mother was like, oh, that's fine if it's okay with you. I couldn't tell my grandmother or my grandfather really why I wasn't going back, because it would have killed my grandmother to hear of drugs. She knew about the drinking, but the drugs and the physical abuse, it would have killed my grandmother. So I held on to that to myself. Gosh, there's just so many things that happened around that age. So at 14, I lived with my grandparents. I snuck as much drinking as I could. And it was primarily the wine that my grandfather drank. He drank this Ernest and Gallo Giulio something or other in a big 5-gallon glass jug. He never saw the jug. My grandmother always poured his drinks and brought them down to the basement where he used to watch TV, Lawrence Welk and all that stuff. So I would drink his wine and guzzle it. I wouldn't drink my grandmother's scotch because it was disgusting. Even as an alcoholic, I wouldn't drink scotch. I just hated it. But she drank Dewar's scotch with 2 fingers of Dewar's in a little cup with 1 little ice cube. And we would sit down and I would excuse myself every once in a while to get some wine. And we would both get quietly drunk while watching Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. And that was my life. That was how exciting my life is at 14. I came out of the closet, big surprise if you haven't figured that out yet, at 19. And I was introduced to the bars, reintroduced to the bars, because I grew up in them. If you happen to be an alcoholic mom and you've dragged your children through bars and things, I was that kid that you see in the bars. Back then, the only video game was Ms. Pac-Man, and they would sit me down with a whole bunch of quarters, and I would play video games while they got drunk, or I would steal quarters off the bar. That was really the tip, the bartender's tips. I was stealing bartender's tips to play video games. But yeah, so it was, I was reintroduced to the bar scene, downtown Providence, which back then was just disgusting. It was a dark hole. I mean, really, it was just awful. You think New York is bad, but downtown Providence was really unseemly. And I loved it. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. It was a wonderland. And I snuck into Gerardo's and No Name, which were 2 bars that were very popular back then. And then eventually, I was 20, I started sneaking into the Yukon Trading Club, which is another great little bar that's gone. And I would go in every single night. This is the Yukon Trading Club. I would go every single night before 7 or 8, because the bouncer didn't show up till 9. So I'd be there for an hour or at least drinking until the bouncer showed up, and I made friends with him immediately. And when I finally turned 21, and I'd say, "Hey, it's my birthday. I'm turned 21." The whole place was so mad at me because I could have, if I had been caught, because they get not raided, but they were checked often. They could have closed the place down or something. Oh, whatever. So at 22. I'm getting older. 22, I met this guy who kind of liked me. I kind of liked him. He invited me to move in with him. So I did. And that was in Salem, Massachusetts. So I moved up to Salem. That lasted about 4 months because he didn't know I was an alcoholic. I didn't know I was an alcoholic. It didn't really work well. And so... yeah, it didn't end well. I ended up living in a boarding house if you are from the Somerville area or the Boston area, the boarding house was, I think it was it 199 Broadway? It was right near Sullivan Square. Oh my God, it was awful. There were 7 of us. 6 of the people who lived there, 5 of the people who lived there were in certain stages of dying of HIV/AIDS. It was just a very sad household. The other guy who lived there was a DJ at some bar. And then there was me. I was working in Faneuil Hall Marketplace selling hot sauce on a kiosk for $5 an hour. And that $5 an hour wasn't paying my rent and feeding me and giving me the alcohol I needed. So I did what anybody did. I stole money out of the register. I would pretend that people returned bottles of hot sauce, and I would just take that money out of the register. Think about that. Who returns hot sauce? Nobody. But every night, something was returned, and I took some money out of the till. And then I would go to the Ramrod, which sounds just about as charming as it sounds. Every single night, and I would go to the Ramrod every single night and drink with as much money as I possibly could, always tipping the bartender so I looked normal. Because at this point, my behavior was becoming abnormal. I would literally walk home from Ramrod to Sullivan Square, which is, I don't know, 5 miles, maybe. Every night I went just so I could afford to tip the bartenders to continue my drinking. So when I walked up to the bar, they would just hand me another drink, and it was a crazy time. It's around that time, 24, that I started to do other things that were very colorful to earn money to continue drinking and do the occasional bit of drugs, the dry goods, the party goods. But I was getting creative in ways of making money. None of it was something I'd be willing to share on a YouTube video. But so I did what I had to do to get some money so I could continue to drink, do my drugs and stuff like that. All the while, still working in like Faneuil Hall for like $5 or $6 an hour. At that point, I'm like 24, maybe 25 years old. I remember stopping and going up to this woman named Susie. Now, Susie sold marionettes, like those puppets on strings, which is kind of what I felt like at the time. She sold marionettes on a cart in Faneuil Hall Marketplace. She had these long, thick gray braids that went down to her waist. She had red, smeared red lips, always lipstick on her teeth. And she had these bright red cheeks. And she was Fruit Loop. She was as crazy as she sounds. She was a riot, but she was also sweet. And she tried to present herself always with this sort of ethereal motion. You know, she was spiritual and open. And she was really the only person I thought would be safe for me to ask, because I could already tell at this point that I had a problem with drinking. But I didn't know it was drinking. I had a problem in my brain. I didn't know what it was. And I thought I was just too close to the problem to recognize what it was. And that's the absolute truth. So I walked up to Susie, who's this like crazy woman selling marionettes on a cart. And I said, Susie, I know there's a problem with me, but I can't quite figure out what it is. Do you know? And she kind of back away. She blinks, you know, those long, slow blinks, like, what? And her eyelashes were so heavily mascaraed that it almost looked like number 2 pencil lead. So each of her lashes were so thick. And she backs away blinking, like, what? What are you asking me? And so I kind of shut down and pulled back. Oh, nothing. And yeah, so that's where I was at 24, 25. Now, between 24, 25, between that age and 33, see, I'm fast forwarding a little bit, I got incrementally better jobs because I got more and more skilled at talking or lying or selling or lying. And I got better and better at presenting myself as I thought I had to in any given situation. And so it really lent my skill set well to sales. And so I got slightly better and better jobs. And with each better and better job, I got better living situation. And by the time I was 33, I was at that time working at Neiman Marcus. I was a makeup artist. And I was also working in the men's fragrance counter downstairs in Neiman Marcus in Boston. And I am living in the South End, which is the neighborhood to live in at the time. Of course, I hardly had a stick of furniture because I really couldn't afford any furniture. But I had to live in the South End in this big giant apartment with a roof deck. And I was spending every dime on booze and alcohol and drugs. My ritual was to come to, because I never woke up, I would come to at some point in the late morning. My work shift, I always worked an evening shift so that I didn't have to wake up in the morning like too early. So my work shift started at 11:30. I would come to, grab whatever was left in the bottle of my usually Southern Comfort. Southern Comfort was my drink of choice mostly because it didn't require a mixer. It was so, it was so sweet. I pull it out of the freezer. Of course, that little plastic thing that slows it down, that's been gone for, you know, hours. And I would down whatever was left over, maybe a crack of beer if I have one left over, and I would get ready for work and I would walk to work, probably still finishing the beer. I would stop at Au Bon Pain, which is a little bakery snack place, and I'd buy a cheese Danish or something, and I would eat it on the way up to my department. And I would force myself through the day. Mind you, I'm always like 10 or 15 minutes late every single day. I couldn't steal anything at Neiman Marcus because security was super, super tight. But I was making a fair amount of money. It was just that I was spending it all on drugs and alcohol. At that point, I was living in this super apartment, 2 floors. My landlord lived directly across the street from me. My landlord also owned Leo. He's probably passed away now, but he owned the Eagle, which is one of the bars that I used to go to all the time. Now, mind you, I didn't pay my rent. I hadn't paid my rent. I owed him 3 months rent, and my rent was like $1,800. Me and one other guy. I hadn't paid him my rent in 3 months. I still had the nerve to go to the bar and buy drinks from him. So he was kind of getting his money anyway, but through the bar. I would have these rational thoughts, you know. But at 33, I'm walking home. I would leave work. This is my day. I would leave work and I would hit the wine emporium on the corner of Dartmouth and Tremont. And I would buy a 12-pack of natural ice. I would buy a handle of Southern Comfort, that big giant bottle. I felt superior to the woman behind the register because she had missing teeth. And mine were, at that point, I didn't have any dentures, but eventually ended up with dentures. So I'm not quite sure why I felt so superior to her because she had a better mouth than I did. I would go home, but on the way home, I would crack a beer and I would walk the long way, winding through side streets so that I could drink beer as I walked home because I couldn't drink it out in the open on Tremont Street. So, and I would just sit there and I'd drink the 12-pack. I would sling the 12-pack in the fridge. I'd throw the Southern Comfort in the freezer. And when I had maybe 6 or 9 beers, I would crack open the Southern Comfort and I would drink probably half of that handle. Half, I mean, that's a lot. I'm not sure what that sounds like to you, but to me it sounds like a ridiculous amount of alcohol. And then I would, that was to get ready to go out. And it could be a Monday. So I would drink all of this. And then the remaining beers, so usually on average it was 3, the remaining 3 beers, I would tuck into my pockets and of my jacket or whatever, and I would walk to the Ramrod and I would drink those 3 beers to get to the Ramrod, and I would drink there all night long. And then afterwards, I would do what I had to do to get more of what I needed. That was my day. That was every day. That was every day. Something I forgot to tell you, and you know, it's already been a half hour of this video, so you'd think I've told you everything, right? Except my blood type. One of the things I left out about my trip to Berlin when I was 14. On the way back from Berlin, I had been without alcohol for probably 3 days, so I'm crazy. I was going back home to live with my mother, who I was sure hated me because it was clear to everyone that I was gay, and she clearly didn't like gay people at the time. I was isolated and alone. I really had no friends, and at the same time, I was developing my first abscessed tooth in my one of my molars was abscessed. So the pain of this tooth, the pain of being in withdrawal from alcohol and marijuana, in conjunction with the shame that I had from being this prepubescent gay guy, on top of everything else and all the pressures of the physical abuse that I'm getting from my stepfather, all of these things were compressing me into what felt like a black hole. And this is me when I'm 14 years old. So at 14, I'm in this coach going back to Stuttgart, and I started a list at 14 of ways I would kill myself that weren't too painful or too embarrassing, because I didn't want to embarrass myself. And I'd have to clean my room before I killed myself, because everyone would go through my room. And so I made this list of ways I could escape. And that's what I saw this list as being, as my escape route, because I needed to escape and there was no other way. And this is me at 14. And that list, I actually carried that list around with me for years. I actually had it in my wallet for years. I don't know where it went eventually, but I would revisit that list and then later on revisit the idea in my mind. And at 33 years old, the final crushing blow, this is the final crushing blow, and this is where I come to my bottom. So there you go, finally, after 35 minutes. My mother, who I had not spoken to really honestly, I saw her when I was 19. When I came out of a closet, I told my mother, I told her that August of my 18th birthday, 19th year. But I really hadn't seen her between then and when I was 33. It was the most peaceful years of my life. But my aunt told me that my mother is in the hospital. She tried to kill herself, and that it really would be human of me to go visit her. I did not want to go, but I went to see my mother in the hospital. She was in a locked psych ward, wearing a pair of little paper slippers that had smiley faces at them on the top of them. And my mother's demeanor is very much like, I am my mother. I am very much like my mother in a lot of ways. In the darkest of situations, I'm trying to find some sort of humor in. And she's telling me jokes where she doesn't know if it's a doctor or a patient until she looks at their shoes and blah, blah, blah. And she spent this next, I don't know how long the visit was, but she tried to explain to me why she tried to kill her boyfriend and his son with a shotgun, and then she was going to shoot herself. And so she ended up in this locked psych ward. My mother's own alcoholism and addiction to drugs and mental illness were monumental. When I saw her and I heard this, I want you to think of the old-fashioned version of A Christmas Carol, where Scrooge is facing the final ghost, the ghost of Christmas Future. And Scrooge is standing at the bottom, at the base of his own grave with the gravestone. And there's the ghost of Christmas Future pointing with a big skeletal hand at his grave, showing the ghost, the Christmas of his future. That's his future, is the grave. And I saw my mother, and I saw myself, and I knew, deepest fiber of me, that this was my future, that I was going to be my mother, which I was destined to be my mother all along. And I decided right then and there in a locked psych ward visiting my mother that I would kill myself. So I got back to Boston, and I went to Pearl Art Supply, and that was on, I think, Mass Ave in Central Square, Cambridge. And I bought myself an X-Acto knife or some sort of cutting knife with a big chunky handle that I thought I could maneuver if my left wrist was incapacitated, that I could somehow manage to do something to my right, because I didn't want to leak to death. You know, I wanted to really just go. I wanted to just check out, just get out of this party, leave. I'm done. I'm done. I can't stay sober for a couple hours. I can't form a relationship with anything. I'm alone in the world. It hurt more to breathe than it could to die. So I just decided, this is it. I'm done. I'm going to take control. This is the illusion of my mind. I was going to take control of the situation rather than end up like my mother in a locked psych ward wanting to die. I was going to take control and just take care of the situation then and there. And I went home and I got into my futon, which was this hideous thing. I mean, I'd owned it for like, decades, and it was this, it should be fossilized, but there was this depression in the middle, like a little oval, that I would curl up in like an animal in a burrow. And in my mind, in my grandiose mind, I had this image of me lying in this depression in the futon, surrounded in a pool of blood, like Our Lady of Guadalupe with the roses all around her. And my roommate, Adam, keening over my body. What could we have done? What could we have done? In reality, I don't know how long it would have taken for someone to find me, because no one needed me. No one. I would have just disappeared. And I lay there in that bed with every ounce of willpower, and I failed at trying to do what I had so desperately wanted to do. And that was really the hardest day of my life. I've suffered a lot. Like watching my brother die under the back wheel of a truck. Later on in my life, I might mention it if I have time, I was stabbed in the chest with a carving knife in a mugging. I survived that, clearly. I've had difficult days. The day that my ex-husband told me he didn't love me, I stood in front of a train thinking about stepping off into that train tracks. I was sober then. There were many days that challenged me, but that day, failing to kill myself, was the hardest of all of them. The next day, I had to go to work. Great. And I'm at work, and I'm standing down I'm at a counter. And at this point, I've been developing these physical symptoms as well. I don't know if it was pancreatitis or what it was, but I'd be standing at my glass counter at the store, and out of nowhere, I would sense this sort of mounting tension in my upper thorax. It would feel like a little bit of a pressure, and I knew what was going to happen. It would turn into what the feeling of a dough hook, like something grabbing my insides and twisting sadistically. And it would be agony, and it would hurt, and then it would sort of ease up, and then it would pass. And then this was happening. Just after that happened, Diane, something with a D, the human resource assistant, walked past, and I'm like, stop, please, help. I need the EAP number. And I don't know where that came out of, but I knew that there was this thing called an EAP number, Employee Assistance Program. And so I need that number. And she went up, she called me with a number, and I made a phone call to the EAP number. And one of the second hardest things ever was calling somebody, because that phone can weigh 10,000 pounds. But I called that number, and someone answered and said, "Hi, this is so-and-so. How can I help you?" And I said, I don't know. I don't know. I think I'm broken. I don't know what to tell you. Okay, hold on. She transferred me. "Hi, this is so-and-so. How can I help you?" I don't know. I need help. And I didn't even know that drinking was my problem at this point. I did, but I didn't at the same time. And like this happened 3 or 4 times. And by the time the 3rd or 4th time someone says, "Hi, this is so-and-so. How can I help you?" I am screaming on the phone. Now, mind you, I'm standing in the middle of Neiman Marcus, screaming, "I don't know. I want to die," and blah, blah, blah. And screaming. And she's like, hold on. Can you get to this hospital at this hour?" "Yes." "Okay." We made an appointment for me to go to see somebody. I don't know who it was. And so I go the next night. I go to the hospital. Now it was Faulkner Hospital, I think, in Jamaica Plain. My appointment was at 6:00 p.m. I'm there at 6, 6:15. I got there at 6:15. And at 6:00, no one's there. And I am really quite sure that I made a mistake. And this is not what I'm supposed to be doing right now. I just need to get out of here. I need to just go home. And I figured if no one comes and gets me in 5 minutes, I'm going to leave, because this isn't supposed to happen. And it's at 6:05, I'm lifting myself up out of the seat. I'm lifting myself out of the chair, and someone calls my name. Ooh, sorry for the pause. I had to use the loo. I've been talking for so long. So we walk up to this office, and I'm introduced to this woman. Her name is Jolie, and she's got these short, really tragic bright red bangs and these big glasses. She looked just like the secretary in Ghostbusters, you know. And we sat down, and she asked me a couple questions. And one of the questions, of course, is like, so did you want to hurt yourself, or is that something you've been thinking about? And I'm like, of course, doesn't everybody think about that once in a while? And just, we talked for a little bit, and then she excused herself for a second. And when she came back, she sat down, she says, okay, well, I've been talking with your team. And I'm like, my team? I have a team? When did I have a team? And she says, you know what, well, we would like you to stay here for a couple of days, just so we can sort of chat, see how you're doing, and figure out what's really going on. And we'd like you to stay for 3 days. And there was a miracle. There was something that happened that just, it wouldn't have never happened before. And I stopped and I said, well, you guys probably know more about this kind of stuff than I do. So, okay, all right, I'll do that. And she goes, oh, good. Well, we have a bed for you tonight. And I went, well, no. No, not tonight. I can't do it tonight. She's like, well, of course, right, of course. She's like, well, no, well, you know, we really think you should. And I said, you know, I have a wedding to do tomorrow. I was a makeup artist at the time. And I said, I have a makeup to do for a wedding tomorrow. And Jolie stops and says, Stephen, you don't think she's going to get married without you? And I'm like, are you single? Because your makeup artist just doesn't not show up on your wedding day. This would be like tragic. And I don't know what else I said, but she said, oh, hold on, let me talk. And she went to my team, and they agreed that if I would agree to come back the next night, that would be okay. And I can't imagine that ever happening to anybody else. But so they said, okay, sure. And so I left that night with a plan that I would come back tomorrow night. The next day I went to work, and then after work I went to the Copley Plaza Hotel, which is now the Fairmont, and went up to this little room, and I did makeup on this bride-to-be, or this bride. Thankfully, she was Russian, and I don't really think she spoke much English, because I told her everything. And that after I tried to kill myself, but wasn't successful in doing it, and I was going to stay in a locked psych ward for either she didn't understand me, or she was really, really good at not understanding. And afterwards, I went across to Neiman's. I dropped off my makeup bag at security, because I said I'd come back for it. And I jumped in a cab, and off to the hospital I went. And I walked up to the hospital, the emergency room, and I walked up into the office, into the ward. It was 2 South. I think it was 2 South. I think it was Faulkner Hospital. It's not an alcoholic ward. It's a crazy person's ward. It's people who are deeply broken, and people who had tried to kill themselves as well. And then the intake nurse asked, like, oh, Stephen, so, you know, how much do you drink? And I lied, of course. And I said, you know, it's not my drinking. It's my mother. It's my brother. It's this, it's that. And she said, oh, of course, of course. And she set me up with a room after, of course, taking my overnight bag, which had everything in it. She took out my skincare. She took out my super cute little belt. I had a little grosgrain red and yellow grosgrain belt, fabric belt, that worked well with my little a navy and white gingham shirt with my white brushed cotton Ralph Lauren pants. She took my sandals away. I was very upset. She took my Discman. We had CD players at the time. She took almost everything away, but I had clothes. That was important to me. I had to have clothes. The other people in the ward all seemed to be stuck there without clothes, and they were all wearing Johnnies, and here I was wearing these little super gay outfits with no belt. Yeah, and so I was in the locked psych ward. I was there for a week. 6 days. 6 days. When I finally got out, they let me out. I went home, and my roommate was home. He told me he had gone to a recovery meeting down the street from our apartment, to learn more about alcoholism, because me and my friend Michael, our friend Michael, Michael would fall down when he left our house. I would fall down when I left the bars. When I left a bar and there was no music, there was no bright lights, there were no boys to hold me up, I fell. And so my roommate Adam had gone to a recovery meeting to find out more about alcoholism. And he mentioned where the meeting was, and it was at a soup kitchen, which happened to be right halfway between work and my apartment. And so with that knowledge, the next day, which was a Thursday, I walked by that soup kitchen, seeing everybody standing outside laughing, shiny, happy. Whenever I go through, if I'm passing through a town and I've never been, and I'm looking for a meeting where I've never been, and I know the address, I can get close and I can see the people, and I know exactly where I am, because there's an energy to sober people and people in recovery that is unmistakable. And I saw these people, knowing them for who they were, and I said, all right, I'm going to go in there after I go home and change into clothes that make me feel like a human being. Because at the time, I can't even talk about the state of my outfits, my clothes at work. They were just shredded. So I went to walk to my apartment. I got about 50 feet. And I passed this one parking lot, and I realized that it was almost the time the meeting started, like 7 o'clock or something. It was almost that time. And if I went home and changed, I'd be late for the meeting. And if I was late, I wasn't going to go. And I stopped, and I turned around, and I walked back to the meeting. Now, this is not my normal behavior. If you've ever seen a wind-up toy, just kind of wind up and hit the wall and hit the wall, hit the wall, hit the wall. That was me for decades. And then somebody picks it up and turns it around into the direction it needs to go in. That's exactly what happened to me. I don't have a God. I don't believe in a God. I mean, people talk about recovery and it's too religious and this and that and this. It's possible to be in recovery and not have a God, a G-O-D. I have a higher power. I do call him Hey You. And I'll tell you the story behind that in a moment. And I walked back into that. I walked into the soup kitchen. I sat down at a chair. It was the only chair open, which is really meant that someone was probably in the bathroom who was supposed to be sitting there, because that meeting was very popular. And I must have just taken someone's seat, but I was oblivious to it. So the meeting, and I heard... Oh. I heard someone tell their story about their own. It was more about addiction than alcoholism, but I heard them tell their story, and I identified in ways I'd never identified with anybody else in my life. And it was pivotal. And then everyone around the room said, "Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm an alcoholic." And then they talked about how they identified with the share, how they identified with the speaker or whatever. And they were going round robin, and it came to me. And I stopped, and I knew within moments of stepping into that room that I am an alcoholic. I knew to put that word and that label and associate, because I knew. And I heard someone else talk about how I felt, and they were an alcoholic. And I said, "My name is Steven, and I'm an alcoholic. This is my first meeting." And everyone claps. There's a lot of clapping and a lot of touching on the shoulder. And later on afterwards, there's a lot of people giving me their phone numbers, and it was just like a little overwhelming. And this one guy, Michael, says, "Oh, you live over here. I live across the street from you. And let me walk you home." And so we walked home, we're talking. He says, "Well, why don't you come up to the apartment?" And I'm like, "Come up to your apartment?" Oh, okay. This is how it happens. This is, okay. If this is how it goes, because I assumed something else was going to happen up there, because that's just what I expected. And in reality, we sat down and he shared some of his story with me. And then he gave me his book, a piece of literature that we read. He gave me his edition of the book. He said he can get another copy sometime, but I really needed a copy. And he said, "Well, I'll see you tomorrow night." And I'm like, "Tomorrow night? like, we do this again? And he said, well, yeah, I go to the Isabella Street meeting down in Bay Village on Friday nights. And so I'm like, oh, okay, I'll meet you there. He never showed up, but I went. And you know, I realized this video is wicked long. I'm gonna stop this right here and make this a part 1. So the next part, which I can post, so it's not like a 2-hour long video, I'll post from where I walked into that meeting that really saved my life. This meeting that I'm going to talk about in a moment is really the meeting that really saved my life, and I'll talk about that and then what happened in sobriety. So check out that next video, and thank you for watching this one. Fly safe. So this is the end of part 1. Part 2 is to come. Check it out. I'll talk to you later.